Thomas Green here with the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. On the episode today, we have Nathaniel Turner. Nathaniel, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm Nate. I'm going to be Nate to you because anyone who calls me Nathaniel typically means I'm in trouble. So hopefully today, Tom, I'm not going to be in trouble with you. I'm a guy from a small town outside of Chicago, Illinois, a city called Gary, Indiana. Is famous for the Jackson 5. So, and Michael Jackson, if you ever heard of him, that's where he grew up at. I grew up in the same town. By day, I work in the financial services industry for now. But the most of my time, certainly over there, I shouldn't say most of my time, a great deal of my time for the past 7 or 8 years has been in the space around education and around parenting. So I've been helping families since 2014 do something we call backward design their children's life. And so I'm sure we'll talk more about that during our conversation.
Thank you for the introduction. And I said before we were recording, there's loads of good stuff on the internet with the content that you put out, which I highly recommend if you're a parent to check that out. But I will open with one question, and the reason why I really need to know the answer is because it's why writing children might be the most important thing parents do. If someone says to me, there's an important thing I should do as a parent and I'm not doing it, I'm highly inclined to ask about it. So can you share with me what that is?
Why writing is important? So if I can, I'll tell you the little story of how it started. I started writing notes when my wife told me we were expecting. I guess in 1994, I would say she was pregnant. Today we talk about the couple being pregnant, but in 94, when she alerted me that it's plus, I started making notes about what it was that I wanted to happen for my child's life. I didn't have a good relationship with my father, was very fearful I was going to mess things up, and came across a little animated film called The Lion King and gave me hope that I could probably be a decent dad. And so I started making notes. And I not shared the notes with my son until he was 2. We walked to a mailbox to get the mail. He says to me, "Daddy, I want mail. Where's mine?" I said, "Son, there's nothing good in here. These are all bills." He said, "Daddy, I want mail. Where's mine?" So I got some greeting cards and some postcards from the local Target and started writing him, and realized that there was something magical that happened in that moment. One, my son would learn to read from his father's words, but moreover, his father had a cathartic experience and realized that there was so much in my own childhood that was unresolved, that writing him was a way to resolve some of my own issues. But also, if I realized that was unlikely that I would leave some great legacy for my son, but perhaps what I could do is give some instructional lessons that could be used not only as a 2-year-old, but maybe one day as a 32 or 42 or 52-year-old. So I thought that was a great thing to do. And that's one of the things I think families can get from writing their children, or some of the things.
How many letters approximately would you say you'd written to your children or child? One son, was it?
I have one son, to the best of my knowledge, one son. I would say hundreds. There are 38, I think, in the book, but I write him all the time. I think postcards, greeting cards as a child, he probably threw more of those away than he kept, or put them in a toy chest or something. But even to this day, I still write him.
And do you actually put them in the post with stamp, or so you actually post
at
them
first?
Essentially?
Yeah, at first, because when the 2-year-old walked in the mailbox and said he wanted mail, I needed to send him mail. So I would go to the office, put a stamp on it, mail it, get home, 3 or 4 days later. Well, I didn't come home 3 or 4 days later, but 3 or 4 days later when the mail arrived, and he and I would walk to the mailbox, he'd say, "Oh, hey, Daddy, I have mail." And I'd say, "Yes, I know. I'm the one who wrote the letter." And he'd say, well, read it to me. And eventually I said, "Man, I'm not going to write you and read it to you." So he said, "Teach me to read." So that was the beginning of that.
And To your recollection, what are some of the best, should we say, principles, lessons that you wanted to share with him?
I would say the one of the things he commented on. So in 2020, he moved to Brazil to chase his dream of playing professional soccer. And I dropped him off in a small town called Porto Feliz, took a cab ride to Sao Paulo, flew to Rio, where my wife called me and said, you need to go back to the academy. He's not doing well. He's probably going to want to come home. I go back to the academy. Long story short, he says to me, I took the letters and put some of the letters and put them in a binder because he was going to be 7,000 miles away from us. And I figured he's not going to want to talk to me. He feels like he's at a point where he wants to be treated as an adult. He's just 16, but he wants to be treated as an adult. And so I'm going to give him these letters. I've written them and put them in a binder. And so I put some in a binder. And when I got back, he said, Dad, did you put the letters in any particular order? And I said, no. Why? He said, because I reread the first three. I remember my purpose. I'm going to be fine. Whenever I return, here's what we're going to do. We're going to publish the letters and share them with other families, because when you tell me I can do something, not only do I know I can do it, I know it's supposed to happen. And one of those letters, I'm certain, is one about dreaming. And so, in fact, when he graduated received his undergraduate degree, on top of his cap, he wrote the words, "Dreams lift us up," which was a line that comes from one of the books, I think Pursuit of Happiness or something like that.
And how's he getting on at the moment?
He's a fourth-year PhD candidate at Carnegie Mellon University in the School of Electrical and Computer Engineering. He told me the other day he may consider pursuing an MBA, but we'll see. He's got about maybe 9 months or so left, and he could be done with his PhD. So
you're a proud dad then, yeah?
Grateful, because I think less proud, just grateful that we have a wonderful relationship, and that he still listens to me and considers me, perhaps most importantly, a friend.
Good. You referenced in your story the pluses where you found out you were going to be a dad. I've got things men should do the moment they discover they are going to be fathers.
I would say write immediately what your hopes and dreams are for your children, and also realize that there's no such thing as a work-life balance. I mean, those are two things that come to mind immediately. The third thing is that you have to continuously improve. One of the things I know about being my son's father is that when he started playing soccer, I don't know, probably, well, football, right? In your country is football, about 4. And what I would notice when I would go to the games, that there would be fathers standing on the sidelines, yelling and screaming at their children to run faster, to work harder, et cetera. And I thought, well, this is such a hypocrisy. The bulk of fathers on the sideline are overweight. The bulk of fathers are not working harder at anything in their own life. And yet we're asking children to do that which we're not doing ourselves. So one of the things I believe fathers should do is set the example. My grandmother used to say to me all the time, the tree shall be known by the fruit that it bears. And so, in other words, I thought, well, if I'm asking my son to be in shape, then I should be in shape. And if I'm asking my son to commit to doing more with his life, I should be committed to doing more with my life. So I just think fathers should not ever ask a child to do anything that they're unwilling to do themselves.
I remember that from one of your talks. So about how frequently we ask children to do the things that we don't do.
Yeah.
So, the work-life balance stuff, why do you say that there's no such thing?
Because there's an old expression that you can't serve two masters. And too often we're trying to serve the master of work under the guise that we're supposedly doing what's best for our family. And I don't think the two things are always equal. I mean, you can work a whole lot, and you can make a lot of money, and you can say, I'm going to take my kids on great vacations and make sure they have adequate resources for colleges and so forth. That's great. But on a day-to-day basis, when the children need you most, you're unavailable. And I don't think that's a successful way to parent. I mean, I know a lot of people do it, and certainly maybe some people have success with it, but I think it's more of an aberration than it is a reality.
Yeah, definitely from the child's perspective, you can't be a particularly good parent if you're not there, right?
Yep. Yep. And we ask them to understand, they don't understand it. Like my son, I tried it. I tried working at a university part-time, and I was a part of the faculty. And one night I came home, or one morning, I should say, I came home and he was at the kitchen table and said, when are you going to be home tonight? And I told him, he says, you're never home anymore. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I get it. I understand exactly what you're saying to me. You're saying to me that I'm unavailable for you and you want me to be available. And you're right. I'm the one who asked you to be on this planet. It wasn't the other way around. You didn't invite yourself over. I invited you over. And now I'm telling you I don't have time for you. So what a terrible host. So I'm like, I can't balance it, at least not like most people think of it. I wanted to make sure that he understood he was the most important person on the planet to me.
So the work-life balance in this context is kind of like work-child balance.
Yeah, I would say, or work legacy balance. When my time on this planet is up, one of the things people are going to remember me by is that I'm my son's father, and how well of a father I am was going to live a lot longer than the kind of work that I do. So when people pass on your obituary, it says who you're survived by. It doesn't say where you worked or how long you worked. So.
Yeah, it's one of the main, should we say, life regrets. They've done some, I don't know, I'm not sure how scientific it is, but the list of things that typically on the things of regrets when people are on their deathbed is often too much time in the office. So do you mind telling me about your life template?
Sure. So when we learned we were going to be parents, we wrote Harvard for an application. The idea was that my wife and I both have what are called adverse childhood experiences. I don't know if you're familiar with those. Here in the US, the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control, that did a study probably about 30 years ago and determined that there were 10 things that would shorten the lifespan of a child, that would potentially make one's childhood development more tedious, may shorten your lifespan, may make your future outcomes more difficult. And what we learned was that my wife had seven of those adverse childhood experiences, and I had 8, and collectively we had 9 of them. So growing up in a home where there's abuse, growing up in a home in poverty, growing up in a home where someone abuses alcohol, et cetera. And we realized that we were kind of misfits, and that these two misfits wanted to have a child. And in order to not mess up that child's life, we should have a platform or a template for what we're going to do. So we said, hey, what is the thing we most would like to do? We'd like our child to have better educational opportunities. We wrote Harvard, considered the best school in the country, got an application from Harvard. Of course, it said you got to do great academically, but there were 2 other things embedded. One was that they wanted students who were world citizens, and the third was they wanted someone who cared for something greater than themselves. And we thought, what a marvelous ideal about how to raise a child. So we scratched the ideal of just great grades and moved to this ideal of intellectual ambition, that to raise a child who was always was interested in enlightenment more than just having great test scores and great grades. Of course, you could get those, but wanted them to be enlightened. The second part was that we wanted to raise a child that was globally and culturally competent, who at the very least could speak some other languages and understood other people's cultures, because the world was big, but it's also very small. And then lastly was to raise someone who cared for something greater than themselves, to raise a humanitarian. And that became the way that we developed this thing called the life template.
It's amazing. Well done. To what degree did you should we say tick those boxes?
For him or for me? Because
I mean, a lot of this stuff is I'm asking you from the perspective of learning,
Sure,
but at the same
sure.
time, it does apply, to your child as well. So from your perspective, do you feel like you did a good job? And from his perspective, is he the person that would meet the criteria for a life template?
Yeah. So academically, is he intellectually ambitious? Absolutely. So Thomas, when he was seventh grader, which would have been, I guess, 12, he started high school. When he was 16, he had tested in the top 1%. He finished all of his high school curriculum. He had earned 33 college credits at the same time and was able to skip his senior year of high school and move abroad. That's when he left to go play soccer. When he did return and apply for colleges, he was accepted to 27 of America's top universities, and then had 7 PhD offers directly from undergrad. So academically, absolutely checked the box. But he's also fluent in 4 languages, and he's conversational in 2 others. So yes, the global cultural component. And then in terms of the humanitarian piece, here's the interesting thing: when he graduated from undergrad, he won his university's award for the engineering student who most represented the Jesuit traditions of men and women for others. And he started his own foundation at 14 called the Social Justice League. So yeah, he absolutely lived up to or lived into the template, and he's still living his life guided by those very same principles.
And you said you have a book, or you were writing a book. Is that available for people? And is this life template in that book?
It is. So my wife and I have been working on a book called Another Way. So it's not done yet, but that is the book where we want to finally share with families the template, how to use it. There's that, and there's this portion of it where we call a section of life where it's the jack of all trades section. There's a section of life where we call it mastery, for familiarity, mastery, and core. And so those are other parts to the template, which is that on the very outside of the big circle of your humanity are things that you should be familiar with, that make it such that you can have a conversation, or a child can have a conversation about many things with just about anyone. Kind of the old days when people respected the ideal of a Renaissance person. Today, we are so focused on fragmenting society, so we all are supposedly just masters of one thing. But we wanted to make sure we raised a child who was universally gifted enough to have a conversation about many things. And then there were things we wanted to make sure that you master: math, science, technology, engineering, English, et cetera. And then there was the question about who you are at your core. So at the end of your life, who did you help? Who did you serve? And who knew their life mattered because of a relationship with you? And those are the things that you'll be found in the book.
Well, yeah, you've definitely got a buyer here if you're willing to ship to the UK. So do let me know when that is available. But have you got any thoughts on multiple children, and how, if that changes at all under that scenario?
Well, I'm told all children are different. Like, I have a sister, we are different. But I think sometimes what's different are the parents. I think parents are different. We don't realize that the parent that I was when I was 28, I probably wouldn't be today at 56. I'm probably going to be a different, or 30, I should say, was born at 30. I'd be a different person. So the challenge is, I believe, if you have a template or format that you can follow, it makes it less likely that you'll deviate from the things that you gave the other child that was exceptionally good, and maybe able to alleviate some of the things that were not so good. But most of us don't have a process for doing anything, which is why I think children have a tendency to turn out very differently, even though they're raised by the same people and maybe at the same time in the same home.
It's a great point. But what would you do differently now that you wouldn't have done before?
As a father, I think one of the things I would have done differently, I wanted my son to finish school at 14, and I let people talk me out of believing that that was a rational decision. In retrospect, I wish I'd have done that. I also wish that I had considered opportunities for him to do stuff abroad at a much earlier age, but I didn't. but the world was different. So I didn't have access to the technology that we have today. In 2012, we were trying to find, I hired a virtual assistant to help me figure out a way to get him out of the country to play soccer. I think today, I probably would have been thinking about ways to get a child out of the country at 3 or 4 to have some experiences in the UK or Brazil or other places. If he was really interested in soccer, to have a chance to play with other kids in other countries and just to see how they were developing, which I had no idea until 2012 when I landed in Brazil and said, oh my goodness, their system is so much different. They're really serious about this as compared to what we're doing at home.
So the benefits of finishing at 14, what are your thoughts there?
So my thought was this, that we base education since the late 1890s on an agrarian system that was established at the beginning of the auto manufacturing, and so families used to have the summers off so that kids could come home and help work on the farm. But we don't live on an agrarian society anymore. And so the question is, why do we ever say kids need summers off? Why do we take any time off from learning? And I thought, well, if you just took those same 4 months and you took those 4 months over 12 years, then you've alleviated 4 years of school. So he could be done by 14 rather than 18. And he could be on to the next portion of his life. So even if he said, I don't want to go to college now, that's great. And if you wanted to take 2 years as a gap and figure out what you might want to do with your life and have some experiences before choosing a college and a major, I think would have been a great approach to have. But at the time, most of the people that I knew, especially the people in my home, i.e. my wife, said, no, that's ridiculous. But I think today she might agree with me.
So essentially it's efficiency, using your time more efficiently to, I don't know, actually get back some of that time that is spent doing, well, what is essentially nothing, a break.
Yeah. In America, we talk about learning loss all the time during the summers. Kids come home for 4 months, and then it takes them another 2 months when school starts to ramp back up to where they were before the semester ended. So the question is, well, why? Why would we do that? Why would we send children home who are by and large deficient in math and reading and science, especially in this country? Why would we do that for 4 months, take 4 months off to know that when they return, they're going to be behind? It makes no sense. It's like it's counterintuitive to people who say they were really concerned about the well-being of children and perhaps the well-being of our future citizens.
I got one on the misunderstandings, common misunderstandings. Would you share your thoughts on that?
About parents or fathers or
underserved and underrepresented students?
Yeah. So one of them is that, like, your intelligence is static. I'm a guy who was told in my end of my sophomore year of high school that the best I could hope to do was join the military. I'm from a town so primarily a steel town. So U.S. Steel was huge in my city in the 70s and 80s, not so much today. But my high school guidance counselor, based upon my educational experiences up until that time, said the best I could hope to do was join the military or work in the mill. Now, he was absolutely wrong. Right? I went to undergrad and graduated a degree in accounting, and I went to graduate school and received a master's in history and theology and earned a law degree. So he was absolutely wrong. But I think because I was a underserved member of the underserved community whose parents did not necessarily know how to advocate for me, that to tell me that the best I could hope to do was to do that, rather than to say to me, learning is malleable. And whatever you were yesterday, you don't have to be that tomorrow. And I think too many times families who are underserved buy into the idea that the best they can be is the least that someone else determines that they could be. My best friend is a urologist. He was in special ed classes. And so I think that that's a big part of it, that families have to understand that that you can be whatever you want to be. You need a process. But you need to first believe that who you are is not all you can be. And I think too frequently, folks who have grown up in an environment where they've been limited believe that the limitations are real and that they can't be anything other than that.
Do you know if they still do that process of recommending a profession? Because it just seems like there's so many instances where it's, I've heard so many examples of someone who said one thing and then they've gone on to be something better, or even, you know, maybe they didn't go on to be something better and it's as a result of that conversation. Do you know if they still do it?
Yeah, they still track students. So if you're a kid who has a low test score, you're gonna more often than not always be placed in the lower classes, where of course the expectations are less. Typically the instruction is not as good as it would be in the other classes. And so in some ways, that whole adage, birds of a feather flock together, you're always around the same kids who don't believe that they can fly any higher. And then you two sort of settle in that environment. There are some studies, if you take a child and put a child in a high performing class, more often than not, the child rises to the occasion of the other kids in the room. But traditionally in this country, where education is based on zip codes and the wealth and privilege of families, more often than not, if you're a underserved kid, you're less likely to have an opportunity to succeed in the way that I just described.
Is it like the postcode lottery or something? Is that what they refer to it as?
Yeah, if your family can afford to live in a nice zip code, you're going to be in the schools that have the best resources, where the teachers are most interested, the best teachers are most interested in teaching, and the colleges and universities are recruiting from more often. And yeah, your opportunities are going to be iron sharpens iron, so to speak, and you're around kids and families who want to achieve. So you're driven by or pulled along or drafting by the successes of other people as well.
So let's say there's someone listening to this who does want better for their child. What do you recommend they do?
One of the first things I would say is to define exactly what that means when you say better, because so often when people say better, it's very ambiguous. I'll give you an example. When I talk to families and I say, what do you want for your children? They say, I want my child to attend college. And I'd say, well, great, but what college? Because all colleges are not the same. A community college is not the same as Harvard or Yale or Oxford or the School of London economics. It's very different. So define exactly what it is that you want for your child. If the world were perfect, I ask families, what would you want? And then that gives us a better ideal of what it is that we're working towards.
Thank you for that. Are there any, should we say, misconceptions around the topic of parenting that you like to squash?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things I tell families is that I think too many parents treat being a parent like a hobby. And I think we lose sight of the fact of who invited who to be here. And so I liken it to a guest. Thomas, if I invite you over to my home for dinner, you would not expect to arrive to cook. You would not expect to arrive to have to clean up the kitchen and do all kind of stuff. I said, if I invite you over as a guest, you're expecting to just come. Now, you might bring a bottle of wine or something. You might say, can I bring anything? But you're not expecting to come and do the work. And you're certainly not expecting to get here and then be sitting outside waiting for us to show up. I think that that's the way parents treat their children oftentimes. We forget that we invited them. They are supposedly an honored guest. And so oftentimes we leave them sitting outside waiting. Oftentimes we don't have a meal prepared for them. We ask them to do a lot of stuff that they shouldn't have to do. And then we also treat parenting like it's a hobby. And I think it's a profession. So I would believe we should all be finding ways to hone the craft of being a parent the same way we do with the occupations that we hold.
I like the outsourcing analogy. So like let's say I invite you around for dinner, but then I outsource that responsibility of being there to someone else. So exactly. The child wants you to look after them. They don't want to be outsourced to someone else. Type deal.
And I'm like, well, why are we having children if we don't want to raise them? Why are we having children if we don't want to spend time with them? Or if we have reasons justifiable, as we say, for not being in their presence? I don't like that. Doesn't make any sense to me.
What are your goals?
The larger goal is that when my time on this planet is up, I'll be known as someone who helped serve and made sure other people knew their lives matter. That's about it. Every day, I'm working on ways to make that a reality. If it's a book, if it's a speech, if it's a one-on-one interaction with someone, I hope, like even our conversation is over, I hope when it's over, that there's someone who be willing to help serve and make sure your life, your children's lives, or anyone that you help or serve is willing to make that a reality.
And for let's say the content and the places to find you, where should people find you if they want to know more?
Our books can be found anywhere where books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I'm sure what are the larger book places in the UK, but I know in America, it's those places. We have a website. I have a website, NathanielAturner.com, NathanielAturner.com. And then on that website, you'll find links to everything else, to our not-for-profit, the League of Extraordinary Parents. You'll find links to the blog, the Raising Supaman Project. I think we used to have a parenting course. We just took it down recently to revise it. So we'll put that back up eventually. But that's the simplest place to find me.
Great name, by the way, Raising Supaman.
Thank you. Yes, super, and not super, because the other name is taken and I don't want to get sued.
Well, Nate, thank you for your contribution in general and for being a great guest today.
Thank you for having me.